Hi, this is immigration attorney Erin, and today I'm going to be talking to you about who qualifies for an immigrant visa in 2026. And there are four main categories under which these immigrant visas fall, and then there's some subcategories under that. So I'm hoping that this video will help you determine what your potential pathway to the US is and how I might be able to play a role in helping you achieve that and following that path. So the first category would be family-based. So if you're wondering, how do I get to the US? The first question I would ask you is, do you have family here? And the second question would be, what relationship do you have with that family? The third question would be, what is their status in the US? So you want to think about if you have some kind of tie already here. There are 5 categories of immigrant visas, family-based immigrant visas, where there's a quota for each of those categories and they have a wait time. And then there's one category of immediate relative where there's no wait time and you immediately would be able to get that visa if you have that underlying established relationship with a petitioner. So with the family-based visas, there's the petitioner and the beneficiary. The petitioner is the one inviting someone to the US, and then the beneficiary is the one receiving that benefit. The petitioner must be either a US citizen or a lawful permanent resident in all of the categories. There's no situation in which which makes sense, right? Like, you can't not have status here and then invite someone to have status in the US. It doesn't really make sense. So you want to think about, do I have a US citizen, family member in the United States, or a lawful permanent resident family member in the United States? Then after that, I would wonder what relationship is it, because you can't petition for a cousin. Even if your cousin is a US citizen, they're not going to be able to petition for you. For the immediate relative category, where there's no quota, the US citizen they can petition for a spouse, a child, or a parent, and nobody else. So those are like the 3 specific family relationships that fall under immediate relative. Other relationships would fall under the preference-based categories. So there's F1, F2A, F2B, F3, and F4. And you can see that if you go on the visa bulletin on the United States Department of State website, you will find the visa bulletin there, and it will show you the breakdown of these categories. So the first one, the F1, is unmarried sons and daughters of U.S. citizens. The F2A is spouses and children of lawful permanent residents. I'm just looking at this list to make sure I say this right. F2B, unmarried sons and daughters of lawful permanent residents. And F3 would be married sons and daughters of United States citizens. F4 are siblings of United States citizens. So you can see that marriage is another factor that would determine whether or not, the marital status, I should say, of the beneficiary would also determine where they are in the categories. The definition of a child can get quite dicey. It's quite a long definition. There is a difference, even though it's quite unintuitive, between a child and a son or daughter. So that's another consideration to think about, is whether or not your progeny is a son or daughter or a child, because that will also determine the outcome. So, which is a bit more out of the scope than this video, but we could get into another time. So then moving on to the employment-based category, overarching category. So there's EB1, EB2, EB3, EB4, which is kind of not even employment-based in a sense, and then EB5, which is an immigrant investor visa. It's not necessarily employment in the sense of the person's work. So the first EB1, you're going to have people with extraordinary abilities, and they do take the word extraordinary quite seriously. So this would be like Olympic athletes, superstars. Those are your EB1s, 1As. Then EB1B would be outstanding professors or researchers. And then after that, you have like CEOs, managers of multinational companies for the EB1C. Those are the 3 subcategories under the EB1. So you can think about if you fall into one of those categories. I have to say there's no gold star that you get or extra benefits that someone would get from having a quote unquote higher level EB visa, whether you get an EB3 or EB1. At the end of the day, whether there's certain benefits to the process, it can be a bit easier because there's no labor certification process in the higher with the EB1. Other than that, at the end of the day, a green card's a green card. You're not going to get a stepped up green card or gold star green card. It's just you get the green card at the end of the day. So I say that to say, try to think about what is reasonable, not what you might be able to achieve. So if EB2 is more reasonable to you, which we'll talk about now, I would say just go with that instead of shooting for the stars when there's no reason to. Okay, so EB2, at least as far as getting the green card at the end of the day, EB2 requires an advanced degree, so this is master's degree or higher, or a bachelor's with 5+ years of experience. Someone with exceptional ability in the science, arts, or business. Those are EB2s. And a benefit of EB2 is that, well, normally you would need to go through the labor certification process for this and have that job offer, have the employer involved in the process. If your employer is not willing to engage in the immigration process or petition for you, whatever, you can do self-petitioning here if you apply for a national interest waiver, which would also be another video. So the national interest waiver allows you to bypass that labor certification process, which cuts off years, at least nowadays, years from the whole immigrant visa process that you would normally go through with the EB2 or EB3. So that's a great benefit too. EB3 was next level for skilled workers, at least 2 years of experience, professionals, bachelor degree, and unskilled workers. EB4, so a bit of a catch-all, religious workers, the special immigrant juvenile status can adjust under this category even though it's not employment-based whatsoever, in the sense of it doesn't have to do with their employment or their employer. So it's a bit of a catch-all, so we'll kind of just leave it at that for now. Like I mentioned before, the EB5 for immigrant investors, and there are specific categories under, or not requirements, I should say, for that as well, which we'll leave for another day. Then, so those are the EBs, the employment base. So you can think about, if you're trying to figure out would I potentially qualify for an EB, think about your education level, if you have an employer who's willing to engage in the petition process, because that will be crucial at the end of the day if you're not able to self-petition or you don't get that national interest waiver approved. So your employer's interest, if you're, what else was I going to say? Education, that sort of thing. Your skills, if you're a super outstanding person, because the US wants all the superstars. So those are employment based. Then moving on to the third category, what I would group as a third category is humanitarian based. So if, for example, you have asylum and then you're able to adjust status based on that asylum, that would be another type of way to get a green card. But getting asylum these days is quite challenging. It's quite a long process, or can be quite a long process, depending on whether you're applying affirmatively or applying defensively and you're in removal proceedings, or how backlogged the court is. If you are in removal proceedings, how long that's going to take. So that's not necessarily, if you're applying for asylum, you are. If you're not, you're not. But I would say if you have just gotten here recently, or if you think that you will be out of status or you're going to need to find another status soon and you do fear persecution in your country of origin, then I would apply for asylum sooner than later, because once 1 year passes, either from your entry date or from the time you fear persecution in your country of origin, then you no longer qualify for asylum. You would have to apply for, unless you fall under exception, then you'd have to apply for removal of withholding of removal. And with withholding of removal, you don't get the benefit of being able to later apply for a green card. You're just kind of stuck with that status, unless somehow otherwise things work out for you, but that wouldn't be the door that you walk through to get that green card. Then finally, there's the diversity visa or the lottery visa. I think it's more commonly known, which is pretty much just that. It's just randomly selected people. I mean, you have to put your name in for the entry, but then other than that, they're randomly selected. Not every country is eligible for this type of visa. You'll have to look online to see if your country is one of those countries that's doing the lottery visa, or that the U.S. is open for applications for that. So those are the four main overarching categories. I would say think about, just to recap things, think about family connections, your education, your job, skill set, your like any humanitarian considerations if you need to apply for asylum, or you want to apply for asylum, or you have applied for asylum, or maybe you've had asylum for 5 years and you didn't know you could get a green card. Now you know. And then finally, just if you're lucky, if you get the lottery visa. So I hope this video was helpful in sort of thinking through those different categories and considering what you might be able to qualify for, or what family member, loved one, or an employee might qualify for, how you could get there. Just one final reminder, these are immigrant visas. There are non-immigrant visas that you might qualify for, which would be a whole different situation. These are just the immigrant visas, or the green card as it's more colloquially known. So I hope that was helpful. I'd be happy to talk to you more about your immigrant visa process, brainstorm with you more about whether you would qualify for one of these immigrant visas we discussed here today, go through more of the nitty-gritty details, all of that. I'll be here. You can reach out to me at erin@lichtlaw.com, or find me on my website, learn more about me at www.lichtlaw.com. Okay, thank you. Have a great day.